Chapter 1, Stone and Shad. Moonstone Territory. The wind here carried weight. It wasn't just cold, it was sharp, serrated at the edges, as if the mountains themselves tested anyone who dared to walk through their breath. The Moonstone Pack's territory was like nothing I'd ever seen. Rugged ridgelines rising like spines, valleys carved by ancient glaciers, a constant low growl in the wind that echoed across stone. It was beautiful, yes, but not in the way soft things are beautiful. This land was carved in strength, etched in survival. I pulled my cloak tighter and let my boots crunch into the frostbitten trail as we passed through the narrow pass. Behind me, 5 witches from the Ravencrest Coven followed, silent and watchful. Selene had chosen us carefully, each one skilled, controlled, and loyal. She hadn't come herself. She didn't need to. Her will came through me. An alliance had been forged, Moonstone and Nightshade Pack, bonded through desperation and blood, and where Nightshade went, so did we. Ravencrest Coven had long been their arcane shield in the shadows. Selene saw the war coming long before the rest did. She had instructed me simply, help them win. So here I was, surrounded by wolves. Not just any wolves, Moonstone wolves, northern-blooded, territorial, and fiercely proud. I'd never met one in person, never wanted to, but war makes strange bedfellows. We passed the final ridge, and the compound came into view. Fortress-like stone buildings jutted out from the mountainside, built into the rock rather than atop it, as though the mountain itself offered protection. Steam curled from narrow vents, hot springs, and tall watchtowers stood like silent sentinels. This place was built to withstand siege, a citadel carved by nature and hardened by purpose. Waiting at the entrance were 2 figures, a man and a woman. The woman's stance was sharp and assessing. She had close-cropped dark hair, a scar along her jaw, and the calm focus of someone used to hearing bad news. She wore her authority like a blade, functional, lethal, not interested in ceremony. I could tell she was Beta. Not just by the way the warriors around her subtly shifted to make space, but by the silence that followed her steps. The kind of silence that meant people listened before she even spoke. The man beside her was taller, with broader shoulders straight, arms crossed loosely. His dark coat couldn't quite hide the power in his frame or the tension in his jaw. He wasn't relaxed exactly, but composed, watchful. When his eyes met mine, I didn't look away. Marcus Stone, Beta of Moonstone, I knew from briefings. Damon's right hand, enforcer of borders, politician when necessary, warrior always. But nothing had prepared me for the intensity of those amber eyes, steady, unreadable, and impossible to look away from. I felt myself drowning in them. I expected cold formality. I got something else. Lyra of Ravencrest, he said, his voice deep even. Welcome to Moonstone. I inclined my head. Beta Marcus. This is Luna Ashworth, our beta female. Luna nodded, her gaze sharp. We appreciate your support. We don't forget who shows up when the mountain shakes. Neither do we, I replied. No smile, just truth. She studied me a beat longer before turning slightly, gesturing toward the entrance. We've cleared a section of the eastern wing for your coven, secluded enough for rituals but close to the healing chambers. Your witches will be safe here. My eyes flicked to the shadows above the stonework, ward lines already glowing faintly along the edges. Good. They weren't foolish. We'll begin reinforcing the wards at nightfall, I said, and set up binding circles along the lower path. Shadowclaw moves in waves. That's what we're afraid of, Marcus murmured. I looked at him again. He was watching me, not in suspicion but with curiosity, like he was trying to solve something quietly. Interesting. We walked together, my coven following behind as Luna peeled off to meet another warrior. I didn't mind that. I preferred a small company. Your witches seemed wary, Marcus said, as we passed into a hallway of carved stone lit by flickering torches. Is that because of us, or everything else? I glanced at him. Both. Witches prefer stillness. This place breathes war. He smirked faintly. You're not wrong. We reached a set of solid wooden doors. He pushed one open, revealing a high-ceilinged chamber with a fireplace already lit, fur-lined rugs on the floor, and stone shelves carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Functional, quiet, protected. I approved. This will be your space. Your witches are 2 halls down. If you need anything, supply runs, herbs, reinforced talismans, ask Luna. She's our network. And you, I asked. I'm the one who makes sure the walls don't fall. He turned to face me fully. We lost 2 warriors last week, 1 more this morning. Shadowclaw has started pushing along the southern slope again, not smart, yet but relentless. His voice tightened at the edges, frustration buried beneath control. A commander's burden. How's Damon? I asked, testing the waters. He's holding, Marcus said, but he's burning himself to keep the line intact. There was a weight to his words. That's where you come in, he added. I studied him for a breath. His jaw was tight, voice clipped at the edges, like someone holding too much for too long. Hold on, I said softly. He stilled. His eyes flicked to mine, cautious, curious. I stepped closer and reached out, fingers brushing his hand. He didn't move away, but I felt the tension in him like drawn wire. When I took his hand, it was like touching a storm. There it was, the whirlwind under his ribs, the buried frustration, the exhaustion masked as focus. All of it knotted beneath the surface. I let my breath even out, let mine carry the calm until his remembered how. The tension eased just slightly. His shoulders dropped a fraction, the storm quieted. You're too wound up, I said quietly. You're burning through more than you need to. His eyes searched mine, not defensive, just surprised. I'm fine, he murmured, almost reflexively. He huffed out a breath, something between a scoff and surrender. He didn't pull away. I released his hand gently and stepped back, letting the moment fold into silence. A beat passed. The fire crackled softly behind me. I've never met anyone from Moonstone before, I added. You're not what I expected. He raised an eyebrow. Should I ask what you did expect? Growling, chest beating, primitive politics. He laughed, deep and warm, like it caught even him off guard. It rolled out into the cold room like sunlight through a cracked window. And gods, he had a dimple. Oh, stars. The thought came out of nowhere. I masked it easily, but something inside shifted, restless. I was known for my calm, empath, anchor. My presence had quieted panicked minds, soothed soldiers in their last breaths, but now with Marcus Stone in front of me. I wasn't calm, not entirely. And I didn't come here for distractions, but he was fast becoming a problem I hadn't planned for. Then he nodded once. Rest, eat. You'll meet Damon tomorrow, and when you're ready, we'll show them what magic looks like when it stands beside a mountain. He left with the same quiet authority he'd arrived with, and for the first time since I crossed that icy ridge, I felt the frost inside me shift. Not melt, not yet, but shift.
Chapter 2, Smoke and Stone. The witch's chamber door closed with a low thud behind me. For a moment I just stood there, hand still on the iron latch, jaw tight. Then slowly I exhaled. She had looked like no witch I'd ever imagined. The brown gown she wore was practical, but it hugged her like it had been stitched with secrets. Boots, scuffed and worn, peeked from beneath the hem as she stepped through the threshold, head high, chin set like a warrior walking into foreign territory. And her hair, black as polished onyx, kept slipping forward across her cheek, catching the firelight like it was alive, whispering things I couldn't quite hear. I noticed, of course I noticed. But more than anything, it was her stillness that struck me, not frozen, rooted like old trees or deep water. She didn't fidget, didn't fill the space with noise. When she spoke, it was spare, measured, not out of shyness, but because she didn't need to waste breath. There was a weight to her presence, grounded, unwavering. She carried power like it was a second skin. And then her eyes. Green, sharp, endless. I drowned in them before I even knew I'd fallen. Like a cliff edge you don't see until you're already plummeting. With a final glance at the door, I turned away, boots echoing against the stone corridor carved into the mountainside. Moonstone's fortress was quiet this late. Only the howl of the wind outside and the distant rumble of hot springs broke the silence. The place was carved centuries ago from raw gray stone, cold and unyielding, defensible, eternal home. I found Luna leaning over the war map in the Great Hall, her fingers tracing paths through carved bone tokens and blood-stained parchments. Her dark skin gleamed faintly in the torchlight, broad-shouldered and steady as always. She looked up as I entered. "Well," she said, raising a brow, "did she bite?" "Not yet," I said, smirking as I crossed the room. Luna laughed softly. We stood there in silence, staring down borders, burned scars, alliances, watching a world reshaping itself faster than we could hold it steady. "I don't trust this quiet," she said finally. "Neither do I." No need to name Shadowclaw, the name hung between us like smoke. Later, I made my way to the patrol route. The cold bit like an old friend, sharp, honest. Moonstone's mountains were brutal, jagged ridges, sheer cliffs, forests older than most packs' memories. But they gave an advantage: concealment, power. At the ridge, sentries nodded as I passed, short reports exchanged. Damon stood cloaked by the southern overlook, breath steaming in the moonlight. His posture was looser than usual, as if something had unsettled him. "You look like shit," I said. He snorted, "You always this romantic." "Only with the pretty ones." A tired smile, Damon laughed briefly, but it didn't reach his eyes. After a pause, I asked, "You all right?" His eyes flicked toward the nightshade border. "Something changed there," he said quietly, "with Iris." I raised a brow but didn't press. The raw pain behind his words wasn't mine to prod, not now, not in this fragile quiet. "You'll tell me when you're ready," I said. He nodded once, grateful. The wind shifted then, carrying a faint pulse of magic. Long past when wolves usually sleep, a strange glow rose from the outer cliffs, soft blue-white laced with sparks of gold. The witches had begun their warding. I stood on the watchtower balcony, arms folded, watching. Lyra was at the center. Her hands moved with impossible precision, fingers sketching runes I couldn't see, lips whispering chants that curled like smoke into the dark. Around her, the other witches formed a circle, grounding and amplifying the power. The air trembled. I squinted. One of them wore a pointy hat. A real one with stars. I almost laughed. "Witchcraft and wizardry," I muttered. "What next, broomsticks?" The sarcasm died as the magic shimmered outward like ripples over still water. This wasn't showmanship. It was raw, focused power, the kind we needed to survive. Lyra didn't look beautiful now. She looked untouchable, elemental, like the storm had lent her bones. I felt it again, something heavier than awe, respect, and something else I wasn't ready to name. Morning came hard and fast. Before the sun crested the ridge, scouts called out, "Movement to the south." The attack wasn't a surprise, thanks to the witches. The wards held just long enough to rouse every warrior in the fortress. The battle was swift, brutal. Shadowclaw never wasted time with speeches, but they hadn't expected the wards. They hadn't expected the witches. I fought where I always did, front lines, claws bared, blood singing. Even as I cut down enemy wolves, my mind caught glimpses of spellwork behind me, the wards bending and flexing like breathing glass. The witches, those odd, flame-eyed outsiders, standing their ground like they belonged. When it was over, the wounded carried back. The dead laid beneath the mountain stone. We gathered in the hall, food, healing, firelight. I saw them then, the witches. Lyra and her coven sat off to the side, not isolated but apart. Their shoulders slumped with exhaustion, postures slack. Their power still hummed low, but they looked spent, too pale. I watched, jaw tight. Mental note made: call Raphael, ask what they need, ask what we can give. They'd done more than their share. And tomorrow, we'd need them again.
Chapter 3. Strategy and Suspicion. The halls of Moonstone felt heavier tonight, the stone pressing in like it knew how much magic we had poured into it. I was exhausted. The rituals from last night still echoed in my bones, hours of chanting, anchoring wards, channeling energy until every inch of my skin felt hollow and buzzing. We barely had time to breathe before the gathering was called. Strategy was discussed, territories mapped, enemies named. And then, finally, we were dismissed. My coven followed me silently, footsteps soft on the stone floor as we returned to our chambers. No one spoke. We didn't need to. The drain was shared between us like a single thread pulled too tight. Inside, the chamber was warm, blessedly so. Firelight flickered against the ancient rock walls, casting long shadows that danced and disappeared. I sank into the cushions by the hearth, letting the warmth seep into my sore limbs. But rest didn't come. Not yet. My mind, traitorous thing that it was, kept circling back to him. Marcus. That wolf, that damn wolf. I'd seen plenty of nightshade wolves over the years, tall, broad-shouldered warriors with fierce eyes and silent steps. Strength wrapped in discipline. But Marcus, he was something else entirely. There was a stillness to him, a command in the way he moved, like the mountain bowed for him without being asked, and his wolf, big, brown, untamed, had brushed close to my aura during the ritual, not threatening, just present, watching. That presence had lingered even after he'd shifted back. I should have shaken it off by now. But I hadn't. So when the knock came at the chamber door, I didn't expect it to be him. I opened it, pulse tightening despite myself. There he stood, Marcus, shirt slightly rumpled, hair damp like he'd just returned from patrol. In his arms, a bundle of cloth, something wrapped inside. I asked Raphael what might help, he said, not bothering with hello. He said these herbs should restore your energy faster. He held out the bundle. I blinked. You asked Raphael. He shrugged, eyes flicking over me briefly. You looked like you were about to fall over earlier. Thought I'd do something about it. Inside the cloth were dried moonleaf, sage root, and a rare shard of thunder quartz. Things I hadn't expected anyone outside a coven to even recognize. I smiled, surprised despite myself. These are perfect. Good, he said. Then, after a pause, added with a crooked grin, now rest, little witch. I arched a brow. Did you just call me little? He smirked, just calling it like I see it. I made a sound halfway between a scoff and a laugh, faking irritation. Watch it, wolf. But the truth was, I didn't hate it. The nickname, the way it softened his edges, the way it made something flutter low in my chest. He left after that, as quickly as he came. No lingering, no words wasted. Typical. Later, I sat by the scrying basin and called Selene. Her image shimmered into view, framed by flickering candles and the ever-present mist of the Eastern Coven sanctum. You're safe, she said first, eyes scanning me like a mother checking for wounds. I felt the backlash from your ritual. We're fine, I assured her. Drained, but the wards held. The attack came early this morning. Marcus's pack held the line. And you. I'm managing. The energy will replenish by dawn. Marcus brought herbs. Her brows rose. Did he now? I rolled my eyes. Don't start. Selene only smiled, but didn't press. We debriefed in full, the battle, the wards, the alignment of energies. She gave advice. I nodded, the usual rhythm. When the call ended, I finally collapsed onto the cushions, the herbs already steeping in the corner kettle. Sleep came quickly, but even as I drifted into it, my thoughts whispered his name. Marcus. And somewhere in the quiet curve of my dreams, a deep voice murmured again. Rest, little witch. And this time, I didn't even pretend to be irritated.
Chapter 4: The Siege Breaks. The days after the gathering were quiet. Too quiet. I have lived through enough wars to know that kind of silence never means peace. It means something is coming, something dark. At night, I watched her Lyra's. She and her coven worked when the moon was highest, strengthening the protective walls with quiet chants and herbs I could never name. I didn't ask her what she did, I just knew it worked. Her magic hummed in the air, something ancient and steady. The ground felt different when she walked by, like even nature paused to listen. I tried not to watch her too much. But I did. There was something about her, something I couldn't name. She wasn't like the other witches I had met. She didn't flaunt her power, she carried it like it was part of her. While she worked, Damon and I led preparations. Luna kept the packs calm. We organized rotations, stockpiled weapons, created fallback plans. Damon barked orders and the wolves obeyed without question. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the Shadowclaw pack attacked. And then they did. It happened just past midnight, the air snapped, wards flared, a long howl echoed through the woods and then another, then silence. Then the attack. They came fast and hard, no warning, no mercy. These weren't rogues, these were trained warriors, Shadowclaw wolves, strong and coordinated. They moved like they had done this before because they had. I shifted before I reached the clearing, landing on all fours with a snarl. The air stank of blood and fire. One of them lunged for me, jaws wide. I slammed into him, rolled and tore into his throat. He collapsed. Another took his place. I lost count of how many I fought. I didn't stop. But then I saw Luna, she was surrounded. She fought like hell, but there were too many of them. I charged, barreled through two wolves to reach her. One of them bit into my shoulder as I tackled it away. Pain exploded through my arm, but I kept going. I shifted back just long enough to slam my claws into its neck and end it. Luna growled at me for helping her, said she had it handled. Of course she did. My shoulder throbbed, blood running down my arm. I ignored it. The fighting got worse. Magic exploded through the trees. Lyra's spells held the line, kept more wolves from flooding in. I could feel her power like a heartbeat under my feet. Then I saw Damon. He was facing the Shadowclaw Alpha. The bastard was massive, twice Damon's size, dripping with blood and rage. Damon didn't flinch. Their fight shook the earth, trees cracked. Stones split. I tried to get to him, but I couldn't break through. None of us could, we just had to trust him. And he didn't fail. He tore out the Alpha's throat and ended it, just like that. The Shadowclaw pack broke, they turned and ran. It was over. I stood there, blood on my hands, pain in my shoulder, the forest burning around me. But all I could think about was her. Lyra. Even in the middle of war, I had felt her presence, steady and unyielding. And now that the noise had faded, it was the only thing I could still feel. We had won the battles.
Chapter 5. Back to Nightshade. We packed at sunrise. The forest still held the scent of ash and blood, but the wards were calm now. The chaos had passed. It was time to return home. Our satchels were filled with crushed herbs, broken crystals, torn scrolls, and wax-dripped candles. The coven moved in tired silence, a quiet relief in the air now that it was over. I stood near the edge of the ward line when Damon approached. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but his stance remained steady. Always the alpha, even when the battle was behind him. Lyra, he said, his voice steady. The wards you set up were helpful, gave us cover when we needed it. Let my wolves fight where it mattered most. I nodded with a small smile. You and your pack held the line. We just gave it a little extra shield. He gave a single approving nod. You and your coven came through. We're grateful. Luna joined him, graceful even with weariness shadowing her steps. She pulled me into a hug. You were exactly what we needed. Please visit us again, not as alliance but as a guest. Count on it, I said warmly. And hopefully next time it won't involve blood and broken bones. She laughed softly. Next time tea and stories. Then Marcus appeared. He didn't speak right away, just stepped up beside me with that steady presence of his. Commanding. Quiet. His energy always pulled at me, calm like thunder rumbling just beneath the surface. You're coming with us? I asked, tilting my head. He nodded once. Your car's back seat is packed full. I figured I'd drive you, let your witches ride in their own car. Safer. So it was just the two of us in his truck. My coven followed behind in our shared van, while my own car, stacked with herbs, tools, and half-torn grimoires, was being escorted by one of his patrol wolves. The drive was just under 4 hours. The road stretched through fading forests and sleepy towns. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his thigh, eyes always alert even when everything seemed still. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it was grounding. For a while, I let my thoughts drift, to the battle, to the moment I saw him get bitten. My magic had cracked for just a second then. The sight of him going down, blood on his shoulder, had shaken something in me. I knew he would be all right. It was a bite, not fatal, but still, it had twisted my insides in a way I didn't expect. How's your shoulder? I asked after a while, not looking directly at him. Marcus smirked. Worried about me, little witch? I scoffed lightly. It's a simple question. Without a word, he pulled the truck over to the side of the road, gravel crunching beneath the tires. Then he reached up and tugged the collar of his shirt down, exposing his shoulder. Completely healed. No scarring. Just smooth, golden skin stretched over muscle that was, frankly, unfair to look at. See, he said, flexing just slightly. Back to full strength. I looked away too quickly. My face warmed. His laugh was low and amused. You're blushing. I'm not. Sure. I rolled my eyes and faced the window, trying to cool the heat in my cheeks. but I couldn't stop myself from stealing one more glance. He was hard, solid, strong. But in moments like this, there was a glimmer of something else. A mischief in his smile, a teasing softness in his voice. It caught me off guard every time, and I found myself loving it more than I wanted to admit. We reached the Coven's forest as the sun began to dip. The trees here were old and deep with shadow, but they welcomed us like a breath drawn after holding it too long. My sisters stepped out of the van and began unloading quietly. I turned to Marcus. "Thank you for the ride." He looked down at me, the weight of his gaze pressing gently into mine. "Till we meet again, little witch." Something in his voice made my heart stutter. He lingered only a second longer before walking back to his truck. The engine roared softly as he turned around and headed back the way we came. I stood there until the sound faded into the forest. "Little witch, huh?" Selene said behind me, her tone smug. "It is nothing," I muttered. She raised an eyebrow, smiled, and walked on. I followed her, but the sound of his voice still echoed in my mind. "Till we meet again." And damn it, I hoped we would. Back at the Coven territory, Kyan approached Selene with that confident ease only a wolf bonded to his mate could have. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her waist. Selene's body softened at his touch like she was home. "Now my mate won't be checking her phone all day and night," he murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. Then he smiled warmly. "Welcome back." Selene blushed, really blushed. I wanted to laugh, but caught myself. There was something sacred in how they looked at each other, a fierce comfort that only true mates knew. Kyan glanced at me with a warm smile. He gave me a 2-finger salute before leading Selene deeper, his hand never leaving her back. I watched them disappear. That kind of bond, wild, grounding, undeniable. Mate bonding. I knew what it looked like. I'd seen it with Kyan and Selene, with Luca and Maddie, Raphael and Diana. Wolves knew their mates. It was instant, consuming. Marcus had never looked at me that way. Sure, we shared glances that made the air thick, and his smirk stirred something low in my stomach. But there was no pull, no claim, no moment where the earth tilted and said, "This is it." I wasn't his mate. That thought settled in my chest, heavier than I expected. Foolish to care, foolish to hope.
Chapter 6, Lingering Presence. It crept up on me quietly. The hollow feeling, a kind of weight that didn't belong to the aftermath of war. We D1. The Shadowclaw threat had been neutralized, the border was secure, my wolves were healing, everything should have felt right. But the ache stayed. It started that day right after I said goodbye at the border. She stood there, chin high, eyes sharp and unreadable as ever. And me, a damn fool, playing it cool. "Till we meet again, little witch." That was all I managed to say, just that, and then I walked away. 4 hours behind the wheel, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. Days passed, I got busy, patrols needed reorganizing. New packs reached out after the news of our victory. I had multiple meetings with Damon over the damn supply run again. Everything kept moving, but something in me didn't. I caught myself wandering to the guest corridor. Not because I meant to, just muscle memory maybe. I turned the corner and... her scent. Still faint, lavender, earthy, spiced. Magic. It wrapped around me before I even realized I'd stopped walking. I stood there longer than I should have, not thinking, just breathing her in. "She's not here anymore, you know." I turned and Luna was leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, her gaze half amused. I raised a brow. She gave me that knowing look. "You're not subtle, Marcus. That's twice I've seen you pacing this hall like some lovesick teen." I scowled. "It's not like that." "Then what is it?" she asked. I didn't answer, mostly because I didn't have one, at least not the one that made sense. But Luna didn't press, she gave me a small smile. "She got under your skin, didn't she?" I stayed quiet. Because she did. The witch Lyra. And damn it, I missed her. I kept wondering what she was doing now, if she was laughing, if she was still working herself into the ground, if she'd thought about me even once since she left. The last time I felt like this, it was so long ago I'd almost forgotten what it meant. But now I remembered. And a part of me wished some emergency would pop up in Nightshade territory, anything, just so I could see her again. Even if just for a moment.
Chapter 7. The Invitation. Weeks had passed, not a single word. No letters, no calls, no sudden wolf-shaped visitor at the border, nothing. I'd returned to my coven expecting something. A sign, perhaps, a message, even a teasing note with that stupid nickname of his, but there was only silence. A silence that settled too quickly, too neatly, as if I'd imagined everything that happened. Had I? I threw myself into work. Politics never slept, not even for tired witches with aching hearts. Selene and I sat through endless discussions with surrounding covens, trade routes, magic borders, harvesting permissions, border alliances. Kyan was around often, Selene's fiercely devoted mate, and honestly, a breath of fresh air. A wolf mated to a witch, and completely shameless about how much he adored her. He brought her tea during our meetings, kissed her neck like we weren't in the middle of negotiating intercoven treaties. One afternoon, when we were alone in the garden and Selene had stepped away, I asked him something that had been lingering at the edge of my mind for too long. Do wolves ever bond with someone who's not their fated mate? He blinked, then tilted his head with a playful grin. Now that's a dangerous question. I'm serious. So am I, he said, chuckling. But yes, it happens, more than you'd think. Fated mates are rare. Most wolves don't wait a lifetime hoping to stumble into destiny. They choose, they bond, they build a life. I frowned. But what if later they do meet their fated mate? Kyan's gaze softened. Depends on the wolf. Some stay, some leave. The bond with a chosen mate can muffle the pull, but it's never entirely gone. And some do break the bond to be with their fated one. I let his words settle, chewing on them quietly. He smirked. So, who's got you all tangled up? I rolled my eyes, ignoring the heat that crept up my neck. No one, just curious. Sure, he said, eyes gleaming with amusement. Totally unrelated to a certain brooding, muscled warrior who dropped you off. I glared at him, but he only laughed. Relax, I won't tell a soul. Gods, I hated how well he read me, and how right he was. Marcus hadn't crossed any borders or sent a raven. He'd left me with that one heated glance and a damn wink, like it hadn't meant more. And yet it had. For me, at least. Now life was moving again. The mating ceremony for Iris and Damon was around the corner. Moonstone Territory had opened its gates to both our covens and Nightshade. Preparations were underway, and I'd been assigned to split duties, guarding our territory during the day, then traveling to Moonstone for the ceremony that night. It was going to be a long day, but I didn't mind. The ceremony was sacred, a powerful celebration of bond and trust. That evening, I stood before the mirror, finally dressed in midnight silk layered with enchanted silver thread, the kind that shimmered only under moonlight. My hair was braided back, adorned with spell-kissed blossoms. For a moment, I simply stared. Not bad, I thought. Not bad at all. And just like that, a thought slipped in uninvited. I wonder what Marcus would think if he saw me like this. I scowled at my reflection. Get over it. But the flutter in my chest said I hadn't. Not really.
Chapter 8, Mating Ceremony. The morning sun filtered through the dense canopy of pine and birch, light flickering like soft fireflies over the clearing. I was up early, hours before the guests would arrive, checking the perimeter and making sure everything was perfect. Damon's mating ceremony wasn't just a celebration, it was an event, one that had been weeks in the making. Luna had charmed the tree branches above the ceremonial circle so that they arched like a cathedral ceiling, interwoven with soft gold thread and moonflowers that only bloomed under light enchantment. There were floating lanterns glowing like stars, tables loaded with offerings, gifts, and absurd amounts of honeyed bread. Don't forget your pretty face, Damon called out from behind me. I turned, catching him adjusting his ceremonial cloak, sapphire blue with the silver crest of Moonstone stitched across his back. You're the one getting mated, I muttered. You're the one who should be worried about looking pretty. He grinned, boyish and smug. I always look pretty. You, however, look like you wrestled a bear on the way here. I did, I said deadpan. It was wearing your smug expression. Luna passed behind us with a tray of fire wine. Try not to break anything before the bonding circle is even lit, boys. Trying, Damon said, then dropped his voice and nudged me. You think she'll be here? I didn't answer, mostly because I'd been asking myself that same question for days now. Lyra. I hadn't seen her since I'd driven her and the rest of her coven. By noon, the territory was buzzing. Guests trickled in, first the Nightshade pack, then the covens. I stood by the gate with Luna as a mix of scents, earthy wolf musk, sharp herbal magic, and honey-sweet enchantments filled the air. First came the Nightshade wolves. Raphael arrived first with Diana, his human mate. Their daughter Christine skipped beside them, eyes wide with delight. Luca and Maddie arrived not long after, with that easy laughter Maddie always carried. Then Kyan and Selene, bound together by invisible thread, her fingers curled through his. I nodded at each, smiled when expected, but my eyes were searching. For her, Lyra, she didn't come. My chest sank before my brain could even catch up. Of course she wouldn't. Someone had to stay behind in Ravencrest. Political tensions were always brewing, it made sense, and yet, the disappointment settled deep. The ceremony began as the sun dipped, and a hush fell over the clearing. Damon and Iris stepped into the center of the Moonstone ring, hands clasped, the ancient words of bonding spoken in the old tongue by the elder. Magic coiled around them, silvery threads binding heart to heart, soul to soul. I felt it when it happened. The snap. That unmistakable flash of power when two fated mates sealed their bond. The circle flared once, then settled. Gasps, then cheers. For the first time since I can remember, my heart didn't ache like it used to. I was 17 the day I met Elena's eyes and the bond ignited. We were born into the same pack, raised just a few houses apart. We'd played tag and sparred and fought like all kids did, never suspecting what waited for us. But when the full moon rose and we both shifted for the first time, I felt it. The pull, the fire, the knowing. She laughed when she realized it, threw a stick at my head. Of course it's you, she said. We were barely old enough to understand it, but we felt it in our bones. It didn't matter. She was mine and I was hers. We had 3 months, 3 golden, stupid, perfect months. And then she was gone. A rogue attack, middle of the night. She'd been out gathering herbs for her mother, insisted she didn't need an escort. She was brave like that. By the time I reached her, the blood had already soaked the grass. I went feral. Didn't shift back for days, wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak. It took Damon and Luna to pull me out of it. Cole carried me home, my wolf never fully healed from that loss. And every mating ceremony since, every snap of bond, every flicker of soul magic, had torn at my insides. Until today. Because this time, as I watched Damon kiss Iris's knuckles and press his forehead to hers, all I could think of was her. Lyra, I wish she was standing beside me. The music started just as the sky turned a bruised purple. Wolves danced, drank, shifted, and howled in celebration. The scent of roasted meat, firewine, and crushed pine needles filled the clearing. Iris and Damon stood near the center, surrounded by well-wishers, their hands still clasped like they didn't want to let go. I stood near the edge of the celebration, a mug of something half-warm in my hands, the hum of the bonding magic still lingering in the air. Then I heard boots crunching toward me. Cole. He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder, his grin sharp and knowing. You didn't vanish into the woods this time. I exhaled a breath, I'm all right. His brow rose, that's not the answer I expected. I turned slightly, watching the firelight catch on the laughter of wolves and witches and family. Everyone celebrating something I once thought I could never bear to witness again. I don't know how to explain it, I admitted, but I haven't felt this light since. I didn't finish, I didn't have to, he knew. Since her. Cole let the silence settle between us. Luna told me, he said after a moment, nudging me with his elbow, about the witch. I shot him a glance, of course she did. He snorted, said that you've been different since. Different is one word for it. She pretty, he asked, feigning casual interest and failing spectacularly. Shut up. He grinned wide, that's a yes. I didn't answer, mostly because yes didn't quite cut it. Cole looked at me for a long moment, then bumped my shoulder again, not playfully this time, but solid, steady. You deserve it, you know, he said, to feel light again. I nodded once, that strange ache in my chest still lingered, but it wasn't grief. Not anymore. It was something else entirely. I looked toward the crowd again. And there she was. Lyra. Laughing softly with Maddie, her eyes lit like moonlight, cheeks flushed from the chill or the joy I couldn't tell. Her cloak had slipped from her shoulders, revealing the dark sweep of her dress beneath, deep blue, nearly black, woven with threads that caught the lantern glow like stars caught in a midnight tide. Her hair was swept back into a loose braid, wild in places, tamed in others, and laced with tiny blossoms that pulsed faintly with residual charm work. There was magic in her, not just the kind that moved through spells and wards, but something quieter, something that lived in her posture, the calm of her gaze, the warmth that drew others in without asking. As if she felt my attention, her gaze flicked to mine. And this time she didn't look away.
Chapter 9, Deepening Connection. By the time we arrived at Moonstone Territory, the ceremony was long over. The sky had already deepened into indigo, stars blooming gently across the velvet canvas. Magic still lingered in the air, soft and glittering, clinging to the leaves and stone like morning dew. I stepped off the trail with the others from Ravencrest, taking in the sight of the clearing now transformed into a celebration. Wolves and witches danced in lazy loops beneath strands of enchanted lights. Tables lined with silver goblets and half-eaten pastries shimmered beneath moonlit banners. I tugged the cloak tighter around my shoulders, smoothing the edges of my hair as I walked toward the heart of it all. Lyra. Luna's voice broke through the hum of the crowd, and before I could even fully turn, she was there, arms around me. "You made it," she said warmly, pulling back with a smile that always reminded me of quiet strength. "I'm sorry I missed the ceremony," I said, glancing around at the lingering magic. "I left as soon as I could." "You're here now, that's what matters." She touched my hand, her gaze kind. "It was beautiful, you'd have loved it." Iris was radiant. Damon looked like someone had dropped the moon in his chest. I smiled. "I can imagine." "Go find them," she said, tilting her head toward the center where soft laughter rose like smoke. "They're still floating." I made my way slowly, weaving through old faces and half-familiar ones. The air was filled with a sort of tender wildness, the kind only true bondings left behind. And there, beneath the arch of woven birch and silver leaves, stood Iris and Damon. They looked like a dream. Iris had always been beautiful, but tonight she glowed. Her dress shimmered like stardust, hair swept up in soft waves, and Damon. He didn't look like the fierce alpha I'd known for years. He looked soft, completely undone by love. "Congratulations," I said gently as I stepped into their circle. "Lyra," Iris's eyes lit up, and she pulled me into a hug. "I wasn't sure you'd make it." I held her tightly. "I wouldn't have missed it if I could help it. You look breathtaking." "I told you," Damon chimed in with a grin. My voice softened. "I'm happy for you both, truly." Iris's eyes misted for a moment. It was more than I ever hoped for. I left them to their bubble of bliss and turned toward the drink tables, hoping for something to cool the warmth in my chest. That's when Maddie practically tackled me. "There she is," she grinned, looping her arm through mine. "Miss the vows, miss the veil, miss the most ridiculous crying face Damon has ever made. But you are just in time for wine and trouble." "Exactly my kind of timing," I said, allowing her to pull me along. We poured ourselves glasses and slipped into the edges of the crowd. Maddie kept up her running commentary, funny and wildly exaggerated, and I half listened, sipping my drink. And then I felt it. The tug. My gaze snapped up, like my body had known before my mind could catch up. There he was. Marcus. Standing near the far edge of the clearing, one hand casually tucked into the pocket of his trousers, the other wrapped around a drink. He was listening to someone speak, but his eyes, those rich, molten amber eyes, were fixed on me. And he didn't look away. My breath caught. Everything around me dulled, the laughter, the music, even Maddie's sharp voice fading into a soft, underwater blur. He looked devastating. A white shirt, sleeves rolled up just enough to show off the strength of his forearms, the top button undone like an afterthought. There was a shadow on his jaw, just enough scruff to give him that kind of dangerous softness that made hearts stumble. The breeze ruffled a loose curl at his temple. And of course, there it was, the dimple. That damned dimple. "Uh-huh," Maddie said next to me, sipping her wine and clearly following my gaze. "The wolf is hot." I didn't say anything. I murmured too fast. You didn't have to. Your eyes just licked him. Maddie, I warned. But it was too late. Luca, her mate, strolled by at that exact moment, catching just enough of the exchange to raise a brow. What's hot? He asked. The way your friend over there is looking at Lyra like she just personally reinvented the moon, Maddie replied with zero shame. Luca didn't miss a beat. His eyes narrowed slightly, amused but possessive. He wrapped an arm around Maddie's waist and pulled her flush against him. That's so, he murmured, his voice low against her ear. Maddie laughed as he lifted her off her feet with effortless strength, already carrying her away from the firelight and into the crowd. Uncalled for, she protested, grinning. Entirely called for, he said over his shoulder, smug as sin. She starts it, I finish it. I shook my head, a smile tugging at my lips despite myself. Some bonds were loud and chaotic. But they worked. Before I could recover my balance, emotional or otherwise, he was there. Marcus. His presence was so quietly consuming that I forgot to breathe for a second. Hey, he said. Hi. He looked down at me for a long moment. You look beautiful. That same tremor from weeks ago ran down my spine, but this time I didn't look away. I let my lips curl slightly. You don't look bad yourself. Oh, he grinned, and there it was again, the dimple. Just not bad. I took a slow sip of my wine, debating silence, but the warmth in my chest, wine or something else, won out. The shirt's doing a lot of the work, I said softly, eyes on the firelight. So are the arms, and that bit of beard. The way your jaw is shaped when you're thinking, the scar near your temple. Stars. Had I really said that out loud? Yep, I was definitely drunk. Not out of control, but loose enough to let truth slip through my teeth. And gods, I never spoke like that. I set my glass down, with a little more care than necessary. When I finally glanced at him, he wasn't smirking, wasn't laughing. He was staring. Still quiet. Like I'd shifted something in the air between us, and he hadn't quite decided what to do with it. He leaned slightly closer, his voice low and teasing. So I should keep this look. I didn't say that, I said, but my eyes said something else entirely. He laughed softly, his gaze dropping to my lips just for a second, and suddenly it felt like the world had gone still. Just us, and everything unsaid between us. I wasn't sure you'd be here, he said. Had duty from morning till evening, I admitted. I'm glad you came. Something shifted in his eyes then, gentler but deeper. Like maybe he wanted to say more, like maybe he would. But someone called his name from the fire pit, and the moment passed like a whisper. He stepped back slightly, giving me that quiet smile that still made my knees hum. I'll find you later, he said. I'll be here, I replied, barely above a whisper. And just like that, he was gone again, leaving me warm and cold all at once, my heart beating far too loud for a night so beautiful.
Chapter 10 Springs. Allies from the southern and eastern packs had arrived late to congratulate Damon and Iris, and as Beta I was expected to help host. Normally I wouldn't have minded. Tonight, though, my entire body vibrated with an ache to be near her. Lyra. Even the name unraveled something deep in me. I stood beside Damon, Iris, and Luna as the new arrivals were welcomed with toasts and blessings. I made polite conversation. I smiled when needed. I didn't remember a single damn word. Because every cell in me was reaching back across the territory, toward the firelit edge where she stood. She had looked up at me like I was the moon itself. And when she smiled back, God, I nearly forgot my own name. The moment the pleasantries ended, I all but sprinted across the clearing, weaving past warriors and elders and younglings dancing wild near the pines. The music had picked up again, drums echoing off the stone walls of the mountainside compound. Wolves howled in rhythm, celebration vibrating through the very bones of the place. But all I heard was the pounding in my chest. There she was, standing near the edge of the overlook where the northern ridge opened out to a drop of endless forest and snow-dusted peaks. Moonlight clung to her dark hair like frost. She had a mug between her palms, her shoulders curled in slightly from the wind, but her eyes, those eyes were the warmest thing I'd ever seen. You ran here, she asked when I stopped in front of her breathless. I gave a sheepish half-smile, might have. She raised a brow. I had to make sure you didn't vanish. Lyra tilted her head, amusement dancing across her lips. Gods, those lips. Why would I vanish? Because you do that, appear like a whisper, disappear like mist. She rolled her eyes, you're being dramatic. I'm being honest, I said, softer now. You mess with my head and my wolf. I paused, feeling the restless stir inside me. He's damn near cloying to get out. She blinked up at me, the wind tugging a strand of hair across her cheek. I reached out, tucking it gently behind her ear. Her breath hitched, so did mine. Come walk with me, I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. For a heartbeat, she hesitated, then she gave the smallest nod. We walked in silence, following the narrow stone trail carved along the mountainside. The lanterns grew fewer. The music and voices faded. Snow crunched under our boots and the sky opened wider above us, stars blazing across it like spilled fire. As we rounded a bend, steam curled up from a hidden slope. The hot springs. I led her toward it, guiding her down the worn stone steps until we stood at the edge of the mineral pool. The spring was fed from deep within the mountain, the water always warm, always whispering with ancient heat. We used to sneak down here as pups, I said, pulling off my gloves. Of course, the elders hated it, said it was sacred. Is it? She asked, peering at the water. Everything up here is sacred in some way, I looked at her, but you're welcome to it if you want. She bit her lip, hesitating. What? She crossed her arms. You wolves are comfortable with nudity. I smirked. You witches are. She glared, cheeks coloring. No, we are not. Something dark and warm twisted in my chest. I turned my back. I'll face the other way, promise. She didn't reply right away. I listened to the soft sound of fabric rustling, boots being removed, breath catching, then the faint ripple of her slipping into the water. I waited a beat longer, then shed my shirt and stepped in, still facing the opposite side. The warmth seeped into my muscles instantly, chasing away the chill of the mountain. All right, she said behind me, you can turn now. I turned and forgot how to breathe. She was half submerged, dark hair loose around her shoulders, moonlight soft against her collarbone. Her skin glowed against the rocks, steam curling around her like some ancient enchantment. You look like a goddess, I murmured. She rolled her eyes but said nothing. We sat in the spring, just watching the stars reflect on the water's surface. Every now and then our knees brushed beneath the surface. Every time they did, it felt like lightning. You really sprinted over here, she asked after a while, voice low. I gave her a crooked smile, yeah, like a damn teenager. Why? I looked at her and this time I didn't soften the truth. Because every time I see you, I feel like something inside me shifts, like gravity changes, like I need to relearn how to stand. She stared at me, eyes wide. My voice dropped to a whisper. What have you done to me, my little witch? She blinked, her lips parted, breath catching for a heartbeat. Then she said it. I'm not yours. But her voice wasn't cold. And her eyes, gods, her eyes softened, like the words hurt her to say, like part of her wished they weren't true. It felt like a splash of cold water. But I didn't pull away. Not yet, I said quietly, certain. She stared, I held her gaze. Something unspoken flickered between us, delicate, dangerous. The night hummed around us, wind across peaks, steam rising. And in the shadows of the mountain, my wolf stirred again. Hungry, hopeful, home.
Chapter 11, Partnership. The night air bit at my damp skin as I stepped out of the hot springs, the swirling steam wrapping us in a misty veil. Above, the vast mountain sky stretched endlessly, dotted with countless stars shimmering coldly through the crisp darkness. Jagged peaks rose like silent sentinels around us, the rugged terrain of this far northern territory both harsh and breathtaking, an ancient fortress carved from stone and ice. Marcus stood beside me, the heat of the water clinging to his skin, his white t-shirt now damp and hugging his powerful frame. His strong arms were bare and glistening, the fabric of his shirt folded just so at his waist. His hair was tousled, and a faint shadow of beard darkened his jawline. When our eyes met, I caught the flash of that mischievous dimple. The restless energy of his wolf pulsed just beneath the surface, an urge I could sense but he carefully contained. Yet despite that, or perhaps because of it, he looked utterly enchanted by me, as I was by him. We wrapped ourselves in thick cloaks and began the trek back toward the fortress carved into the mountainside. The cold night air prickled at my face and hands, but the warmth from the springs lingered in my bones. The scent of pine and stone filled the air, mingling with the faint crackling of fires. As we neared the entrance to the compound, I felt the weight of the moment settling between us like a heavy fog. The rugged stone walls loomed tall, built to withstand any assault, as if the mountains themselves were guarding this place. Marcus's hand brushed against mine, fingers lingering just long enough to send a spark through me. Then he paused at the threshold and looked at me with a vulnerability that caught me off guard. "I can take you back to Winter Hollow," he said quietly, voice rough with unsaid feelings. I shook my head softly, meeting his gaze. "I'll leave with Rowan and the Coven," I replied. "You'll need rest, and I am sure the pack will have duties to handle." He hesitated, a flicker of regret passing through his amber eyes. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he bent and kissed the back of my hand. The touch was gentle and reverent, filled with unspoken promises and longing. My skin tingled from where his lips met mine, and my heart tightened painfully. Before I could speak, I turned away and slipped into the shadows of the mountainside. Already, I missed the steady warmth of his presence beside me. The sharp night air pressed in around me, colder now without him, but deep inside, a small fire burned bright, a quiet ember of hope and connection I wasn't ready to let go. Behind me, I could hear the soft sound of his footsteps fading into the distance, steady and unwavering, like the unspoken bond weaving us together in this wild, unforgiving land.
Chapter 12, Beginning of Forever. The morning came too soon. I barely caught 4 hours of sleep, and yet the day was relentless from the moment the sun pierced through the high mountain peaks. Damon had taken the morning off, as he should, having just mated with Iris in a ceremony that could have warmed the coldest heart, so everything else fell on my shoulders. I ran patrol plans, checked supply shipments, handled a rogue alert that turned out to be a bear, and then dealt with a minor squabble between two younger warriors. And just as I managed to steal a moment of quiet in the war room, Luna strolled in with a grin that spelled trouble. So, she began dragging the word like a blade across my comm. "Where exactly did you and Lyra disappear off to last night? Hot springs, cold mountains, bit of both." I looked up from the patrol maps and gave her my flattest stare. "Luna." Cole chose that exact moment to saunter in, coffee in hand, catching just enough to join in. "Don't go all Alpha Stern on us, Marcus. I saw you, practically sprinting down the trail like a lovesick pup." I groaned, slamming my pen down. "Are you two seriously gossiping like elders at market?" "No," Luna said, smiling sweetly. "Just enjoying the rare sight of our ever-composed beta finally falling flat on his emotional ass." I didn't answer, mostly because they weren't wrong. Underneath the teasing, though, my wolf was anything but settled. He was pacing constantly, restless, frustrated, agitated. He missed her, and so did I. The silence had weight. It had been a week since the ceremony, since the hot springs, since she vanished into the mist with her coven, and I stood in the cold watching the shadows swallow her like she'd always belonged to another realm. And yet every night since, I'd gone to sleep thinking of the way her fingers brushed mine, the soft intake of her breath when I'd kissed her hand. I'd never been good at waiting, and neither was my wolf. He was pacing now, irritable, alert, almost sulking, as I stood beside the vehicle, waiting for the compound gates to open. Damon had sent me with an encrypted packet for Raphael of Nightshade, which was fine, any excuse to see her again. We'd been texting all week, brief messages, quick teases, just enough to keep us tethered through the silence. This morning, I sent her another. "Me heading to Nightshade today. Damon wants me to deliver something to Raphael, want to meet after." No reply for an hour, then. "Lyra's maybe." That made me laugh. Winter Hollow was breathtaking, snow-glazed forests, old pines leaning over the narrow road like guardians, mountains distant and stoic. I'd always liked the drive here despite it being 4 hours across rough, winding terrain. But today every minute had dragged like molasses. Every curve of the road reminded me of her voice, her smile, the way her magic made the air hum around her. After I delivered the encrypted message to Raphael, I caught Kyan waiting outside the hall. "Tell your alpha we received it," he said, then raising a brow, "and tell your wolf to behave." "I always behave," I said deadpan. Kyan smirked, arms crossed. "If you hurt her, Selene will hex your bloodline into extinction, and trust me, she means it." I clapped him on the shoulder, chuckling, noted. Then I texted Lyra. Me done with the alpha business, where are you, little witch? She replied seconds later. Lyra, follow the path behind the hall, I'm already walking. I turned, boots crunching against the snow as I moved toward the trail. Trees loomed above me like frozen sentinels, branches heavy with white. And then I saw her. She stood beneath the silver glow of the sky, snowflakes tangled in her braid, cloak sweeping softly around her like shadows come to life. Every part of me froze, then ignited. Her eyes lifted when she saw me, her lips curving into something quiet and knowing. I didn't rush, I couldn't, I just looked at her, let myself feel it. The way my wolf quieted, not with surrender but with awe, the way the world stopped spinning, the way she made even snow feel warm. You came, she said softly, almost like a dare. I would have crossed 1,000 miles, I murmured, don't tempt me. We started walking slow, careful steps through the pine. Our fingers brushed once, then stayed together. She didn't flinch. Neither did I. My heart felt full and too fragile all at once, like one breath from her could shatter me completely. I missed this, I said, then corrected, I missed you. She turned toward me, snow in her lashes, and something cracked inside me. Marcus, she whispered. That was all it took. I stopped walking, turned to face her fully. Her eyes widened just slightly, with recognition, like she had been waiting for me to reach this exact moment. I can't keep pretending this is casual, I said, voice rough. I see you once and nothing's the same. I hear your voice in everything. I feel your presence like it branded itself into my bones. She looked like she wanted to speak, but I closed the distance slowly, deliberately, until there was barely air between us. I don't know what spell you've cast on me, Lyra, I said, gaze locked on hers, but I'm not fighting it. Then I kissed her. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't messy. It was the kind of kiss that stole the wind from the world, slow, sure, like gravity had been pulling us toward it since the day we met. Her lips were soft and cool from the cold, but she melted into me like fire, her hands gripping the front of my coat. I cradled her jaw gently, tilting her face up as I deepened the kiss, pouring every ache, every unspoken word into the space between us. It felt like magic, not the kind you cast with spells, the kind that rewrites fate. When we finally pulled apart, our foreheads rested together, breath mingling in the frozen air. She smiled just a little, then whispered, you should probably warn me next time. I brushed my thumb against her cheek. No promises, little witch. Snow drifted lazily around us, soft and silent, and I stood there, heart thundering, sure of only one thing. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning.
Chapter 13. The Weight of Wanting. The snow was falling heavier by the time we turned back. The walk through Winter Hollow's woods was quiet, like the land itself was holding its breath. My boots crunched softly against the frozen trail, and beside me, Marcus matched my pace, tall, steady, warm. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. His fingers brushed mine, and I held on. We walked slower than we needed to, maybe on purpose. Maybe because goodbye felt like frost in the lungs. At the edge of the forest, where the trails split off toward the main road, he stopped. His Jeep was parked just beyond the trees, engine humming faintly. He looked at me for a long moment with his amber eyes sparkling with the nightlight. I should go, he said softly. I nodded, forcing a small smile. Pack duties await. He touched my hand again, thumb grazing my knuckles like he didn't want to let go. I'll see you soon, he said, with a quiet promise tucked in every word. And then he was gone. I stood there a minute longer than I needed to, watching the red glow of his taillights disappear into the trees. Only when the silence returned did I turn and head back. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it, the shift in the room. Conversations paused. Eyes tracked me, curious, surprised, maybe even suspicious. I wasn't sure what I looked like, but I imagined the glow on my face and the slight curve to my lips didn't exactly scream the usual composed Lyra. I wasn't calm. I was lightheaded and warm and completely, stupidly happy. Selene and Kyan sat near the hearth, her pale braid draped over one shoulder, a book balanced on her knee. She didn't say anything as I walked past. She just gave me a long, knowing look over the edge of her cup. I didn't meet her eyes. I didn't need to. She knew. In my room, I threw off my cloak and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My heart hadn't settled since the moment he kissed me. It still hadn't. Every part of me felt like it was humming in a language I couldn't quite understand, one I didn't know how to speak but already felt fluent in. I grabbed my phone from the windowsill and typed quickly. "Me, text me when you reach home safely." The reply came after few hours. I saw it the next morning. "Marcus, I did. Roads were quiet. I missed you the moment I left." I stared at the screen longer than I meant to, smiling like an idiot. But then something shifted, quiet and sharp. A thought that had been circling since the night of the hot springs, one I hadn't dared give voice to. I typed slowly. "Me, what happens when you find your mate one day?" He took longer to respond this time. Then, finally. It was kind, gentle, considerate. But it didn't settle the ache in my chest. Because I knew how the fated mate bond worked. When it clicked, it was instinct, undeniable and immediate. All around me, wolves and witches from Nightshade and Ravencrest were finding their other halves, threads of devotion snapping into place like stars aligning. I set the phone down and sat back on the bed, letting my fingers press into the soft quilt. The room felt colder now, despite the fire in the hearth. That familiar heaviness settled on my chest, the one that made itself at home whenever I thought too long about the past. I hadn't always been this version of myself, powerful, composed, in control. I had once been just a girl in a too large cloak, standing at the edge of her coven with trembling hands and magic that flickered like a dying candle. My mother had never let me forget it. Every failure was a stain, every misstep a reminder that I was not enough, not like her. My sister had always been the golden one, stronger, brighter, more gifted. And I loved her, gods, I loved her, but it was hard not to drown in that shadow. Hard not to bleed in silence while everyone else applauded. So I left. I walked away from the only home I knew and found Selene. Or maybe she found me. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't promise I'd be special. She just believed I could be more. And slowly I became that. A witch with a spine of stormlight. And yet here I was, years later, still battling the echo of a mother's cold smile. Still wondering if love was a thing meant for others, not for the girl who always felt like too much and not enough at once. I shook my head hard. I wouldn't let that voice come back, not now. Not when something good was finally growing inside me. I picked up the phone again, staring at Marcus's last message. "We'll talk about it next time we meet, I promise." And we would. I believed that. I had to. I set the phone down. My heartbeat was still uneven, my mind still restless. But beneath all the doubt, one truth stayed anchored inside me. He had kissed me like I mattered, like I was fire and starlight and something sacred. And I would not let the ghosts of my past dim that spark. Whatever came next, I'd face it on my own terms. With my magic. With my heart. With him.
Chapter 14, The Visit. It had been 2 weeks since I'd seen her. 2 long fucking weeks. Sure, we talked every night like clockwork, texts during the day, her dry humor lighting up my screen, her voice low and soothing in the evenings when we called. We talked about everything and nothing. I knew her favorite tea now, that she couldn't sleep without music, but knowing wasn't enough. I wanted to see her, smell her lavender scent in the air, watch the way her nose crinkled when she was amused, and I needed to tell her the truth, the whole truth, about Elena, about the mate I lost. A part of me dreaded it, but another part knew she deserved to hear it from me, not in fragments or whispers, and I couldn't keep carrying it like a wound that never closed. So I took the day off. No patrols, no reports, no politics, just me, my truck, and the pull that dragged me north. Winter Hollow was as frozen and beautiful as ever, a canvas of snow and silence. The mountains rising like ancient gods around the small, scattered buildings of Nightshade Territory. The roads were half buried, the air sharp with winter. I pulled up to the Coven house and texted her. "Me, guess who brought snow boots and no patience?" She replied seconds later. "Lyra, are you here?" Me, outside." The door opened and there she was. I forgot how to breathe. Her long dark hair was down, falling like a waterfall of midnight over her shoulders, cheeks flushed from the cold. She wore this oversized dark green sweater that made her look even smaller, softer. Her eyes widened, then she smiled. "Gods, I was fucked." She practically flew down the steps, launching herself into my arms before she seemed to think better of it. We stopped, inches apart. Her scent, lavender and old magic, filled my lungs. My wolf purred. "Hi," she said, a little breathless. "Hi," I murmured back, brushing a wind-blown strand of hair behind her ear. We ended up walking again like we always did, past the trees laced in frost, down snow-covered trails. The world around us was still hushed. She kept sneaking glances at me like she still couldn't believe I was real. I was doing the same. "You really came," she whispered. "Couldn't stay away." Her cheeks reddened, and not from the cold. We ended up on a low ridge overlooking the valley. The sun had begun to set, spilling gold and crimson across the snow. She turned to face me, and something in me shifted. I leaned in, she didn't back away. Our lips met. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't desperate. It was achingly slow, as if we were memorizing the taste of each other. My hand slid to her waist, hers tangled in my jacket. Her body leaned into mine, soft and sure. When we finally broke apart, she was breathless, so was I. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the cold night. I didn't answer. Instead, I took her hands in mine, fingers entwining like the warmth between us could keep the snow at bay. We started walking, step by crunching step, the snow soft beneath our boots. At the border stood a small, weather-beaten hut, half buried in snowdrifts, smoke curling faintly from its chimney. Its worn wooden bench was dusted with fresh snow. We brushed the flakes aside and sat down, shoulders nearly touching, sharing warmth against the cold night. "I've been thinking," I said quietly, breath puffing in the icy air, "about that question you asked." She glanced at me, her green eyes reflecting the pale light. "What happens," I continued, "if you find your fated mate?" She said nothing, waiting. "There won't be one," I said, voice steady but low, "not for me." Her brow furrowed, confusion and something softer swirling in her gaze. "I had one," I admitted, "Elena. We grew up together, bonded after our first shift. It was sudden and fierce. We had only 3 months before she was taken in a rogue attack." My hand found hers, fingers tightening despite the chill. My wolf nearly unraveled then. I thought I'd never feel like that again, not really. I met her eyes, the cold biting at my skin, but her warmth steady. "And then there was you." Her breath caught, a quiet frost forming on her lashes. "That pull I had with Elena was fate, but this with you," I squeezed her hand. "This is choice, it's mine, and it terrifies me." She leaned her head gently against my shoulder, the snow swirling around us like a silent witness.
Chapter 15. Together. The snow continued to fall around us as we sat on that weathered bench, my head against his shoulder, his confession settling into the quiet space between us like something sacred. The cold bit at my exposed skin, but his warmth anchored me, this powerful man who just handed me his heart and all its scars. When I finally lifted my head to look at him, snowflakes caught in his dark hair like scattered stars. His eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Choice," I whispered, testing the word on my lips. It felt heavier than fate, more precious somehow. He'd already told me about Elena there on that bench, about the mate he'd lost, the bond that fate had given and cruelly taken away. But hearing it again in my mind, watching the pain flicker across his features in the pale moonlight, I felt the full weight of what he'd shared. This powerful man who commanded respect and fear had shown me his deepest wound, trusted me with the story of 2 young souls whose future had been stolen by violence. The way he'd said it, that pull I had with Elena was fate. But this, with you, this is choice, echoed in my chest like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. A part of me wanted to weep for her, this girl who'd never gotten to grow old with him, never got to see what he'd become. I ached for his loss, for the love story that death had stolen. But underneath that genuine sorrow lived something smaller and more selfish, a flutter of relief so profound it nearly brought me to my knees. She was gone. And somehow, impossibly, I was here. The guilt of that relief should have consumed me, but instead it felt like finally being able to breathe, like stepping out of someone else's shadow and into sunlight for the first time. We stood from the bench, snow crunching beneath our boots as we began walking again. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was full of understanding, of something shifting and settling into place. He kept my hand in his, our fingers interlaced like they belonged that way. "You don't scare me," I told him as we walked, my voice barely carrying over the whisper of falling snow. Your past doesn't, your grief doesn't, none of it. He stopped walking then, turning to face me fully. The way he looked at me, like I was something sacred, something miraculous, made my chest tight with emotion. This powerful man, this alpha who commanded armies and ruled territories, was standing before me completely exposed. Raw, vulnerable in a way that I knew he'd never been with. He'd given me his greatest wound, his deepest truth, and trusted me not to turn away. When he leaned in this time, I met him halfway. The kiss was different from the one we'd shared on the ridge earlier. That one had been slow discovery, tentative wonder. This was deeper, a claiming, an answer to his confession. His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing away snowflakes that had caught on my cheeks. I could taste the cold on his lips, feel the tremor in his breathing. This wasn't just about one anymore. It was about recognition. About two people who'd been walking around with pieces missing, finally finding what fit. When we finally broke apart, he pressed his forehead to mine, both of us breathing unsteadily. Snow continued to fall around us, muffling the world in white silence. I was not whole, he whispered, and the confession felt like watching someone bleed. Not really, not for a long time, but with you, gods, with you, I remember what it felt like to be more than just surviving. Tears stung at the corners of my eyes, hot and insistent, but I blinked them back. This moment was too sacred to let blur with tears. Let's figure out what choice looks like. Together, I murmured, my lips brushing against his skin. He pulled back slightly, just enough to search my face. Snowflakes clung to his dark lashes, the moonlight catching on his cheekbones. Together, he echoed, like he was tasting the word for the first time. The end. Thanks for spending your time with me. I'll be right here next Friday with a brand new story. Until then, keep dreaming, keep loving, and stay beautifully you.